Look, there's this dog over here. That's
Yeah,
awesome.
there's my little dog coming here. This is Odin and Amelia. You guys go outside again, huh? We're having a podcast here. Thank you very much.
You listen perfectly.
As the firstborn son and the way my parents brought me up, you definitely know what's going on. And I spent 7 years in America, and it was actually very helpful to just find myself in the person who I actually am, and not just in the context of this family.
Christian Fürstenberg was the very first guest we had on Where Madness Lies. He's the hereditary prince of a German family that's been around for 1,000 years. And he's awesome. He's super grounded, he's hilarious. We learned a ton from our time with him, and I hope you guys enjoyed this episode as much as we had filming it. And I also hope we have him back on the show again soon.
Christian, thanks so much for having me. This is really, really fun and exciting to be here to actually spend time with you in your home, in your castle. It's a really magical, special place. So what do people call you?
You obviously know me as Christian, but my official, let's say, title, which technically isn't really a title anymore, but what people call it is Christian, the Hereditary Prince of Fürstenberg. His Serene Highness Christian, the Hereditary Prince of Fürstenberg. Hereditary because when my father dies, we hope he lives for much longer, but once he dies, I'm going to be the Prince of Fürstenberg. Technically, since 1918, we don't have these titles anymore, but funny enough, people still use them here in very socialist Germany all the time. People come to me saying, "Your Serene Highness, it's so nice to meet you."
Most families that are prominent lose their wealth or status in the modern world only after a couple of generations, maybe 3 generations if they're lucky 4. Your family's been around for nearly 1,000 years. What do you think has led to this lasting success?
There's not one solution, no? The first writings are from the 800s. You can imagine the incredibly difficult times that the family has experienced. I think it's just tradition, and to have that drive to not just think of building something for yourself, but to think in generations. Even now, every decision I take is not for how am I going to profit from this, but how is the son of my son going to profit from this?
You mentioned earlier that you're a fan of Yellowstone.
It's funny, so I got completely into it. It touched me specifically, one, because also, there's the heritage. I think they're 5th generation or 7th generation. And for us, it's 27 generations. My son is my 27th generation. And so you have that drive of we have to keep it together and we want to bring it to the next generation. And this fear of the government or other organizations trying to take your land, I have that in day to day. Just today, I was speaking with our forestry chief, and we were just talking strategies on politics and how we're going to go about, because you always have this attacks from all over the place. It's like they say in that show, if you own something nice, you got to hold on to it because everybody wants that.
I mean, from an American perspective, the idea of royalty can sometimes be extremely foreign considering what the foundation of America was. But when I walked in here today, I thought to myself, man, I'd fight like hell for this place if this was something that was my legacy. What do you think is most misunderstood about what it means to have these obligations and these duties the way that you have?
Living in a castle is something wonderful, but it's also something straining. It's incredibly hard to maintain a place like that. You have costs that are ridiculous, You have these 2 hearts. One is your businessman inside of you who says, I'm looking at these bills and it doesn't make sense. We should live in a more economical home. And then you have the other side in you, which is the traditions. And you're like, this thing has been in our family for 600 years. I cannot leave it behind. And every penny I make goes into this castle and into upkeeping our traditions.
What was that like being a child, kind of coming up in a world where you lived in places like this?
As a kid, you don't realize you're in a castle. It's just your home. And it's when your kid friends come over, everybody's super excited to play at your house because you can play hide and seek all the place. There's cool stuff to explore and stuff like that. As a kid, we were also completely freaked out about ghosts all the time. I was really scared that there was ghosts around. I thought that I could feel them and hear them and all that kind of stuff. And I don't know if other kids have that also in normal houses and castles. And I was speaking to other colleagues that grew up in castles, and they're like, "Oh yeah, we also were freaked out all our childhood," kind of thing. So that's the thing.
Speaking of which, we were walking down the stairs here to sit down right now. We saw like a giant boar that your great grandfather,
2 times great, yeah.
Yeah, massive animal that's terrifying. It could have killed Robert Baratheon in Game of Thrones or something. I was terrified looking. If I had been a 3 or 4-year-old in the house, every time walking by that thing, it would have.
What about the bear?
Blown my brain. The bear is crazy too. It's crazy. Since you've been in this world and around this world since you were a child, did you ever feel like it was difficult to be an individual in the context of such a prominent family history and family name?
Growing up in a family, I guess, as the firstborn son and the way my parents brought me up, you definitely know what's going on. there were many events where my parents, very young, would send me there already to meet politicians and official events where we had to open things. Sometimes when my father couldn't make it, he would send me there at a young age already to hold a speech or to be there or something like that. So it's definitely a certain pressure. It was also a reason why my parents at some point decided I should go to school in the United States to get away from all this a little bit and to just grow up completely away from it. And I went to high school actually outside of Boston, and then I went to university in DC, and I spent 7 years in America, and it was actually very helpful to just find myself in the person who I actually am, and not just in the context of this family. And so now with my kids, we're trying to keep it very low key here with them in the village life. You know, they go to town school, they have all their buddies, they try to just be as normal as possible. And we try not to overwhelm them too much with it. But it's, you know, you grow up in a castle. As I said, as a kid, you don't realize it so much, but it is there, it is something. And we're still trying to figure it out. Our kids are still small. We're trying to see how it's going to go.
Do you guys plan to send your kids away at any point in time to try to give them sort of the same experience that you were able to have?
It's going to be tough with my wife. She's just too heartbroken to even think about letting them go before they're 18 or something like that. So we'll see about that. I think it was very formative. It was great to get out of the area, out of Germany, and to be growing up in a completely different environment. The U.S. was great in the late 90s when I was there. It was absolutely a fantastic time. I sometimes wonder now if it's still so great. No, I think it is. You know, and
we're struggling a little bit.
But of the political influences, and
thank you, Europe, actually, for influencing us to make us even more absurd than Europe in a lot of ways.
Right, exactly. So that's gonna be that's gonna be the excitement.
Look, there's this dog over here. That's awesome.
Yeah, there's my little dog coming here. This is Odin and Amelia. You guys go outside again, huh? We're having a podcast. Thank you very much.
They listen perfectly.
So we'll see. You know that they're 10 now. The oldest is 10, 8, 4, and 3. So we're going to play it, see how it goes, how they're in school, what the challenges are that they're facing, and then decide then.
What I took from maybe your experience, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, is that you got to be relatively anonymous as well when you were in the States. Here you have a really famous last name. There's a beer company that your family started in the 1200s or
That's
earlier.
Right. Yeah.
Your family held on to that beer company until 2003, and that beer still exists and is extremely popular. Obviously, just going around being a famous person all the time has obviously its benefits, but if don't have the experience of being away from that, maybe you're a very different person now than you would have been otherwise, right?
Yeah, sure. There comes an age when they're 10, 12, you don't know what's going on. A little later on, all the kids around you, everybody understands that you all come from a bit more privileged background, and it can be a hindrance. It can be difficult, you know, and so it can go to your head that all of a sudden you think that you're better or something like that. So I think it's very important to just be away from all that. But we'll see. You know, every kid is different. Every all the times are different. So I also don't like to plan too far ahead, because I think it's important to kind of see how things are, how things develop, and not to say, well, my kid at age 12 is going to obviously do that, because it's always been like that. I want to kind of see how it goes, you know.
Times have changed since I was a kid, since you were a kid. You probably had to face different things than your father had to face. What kind of challenges do you think your kids are going to have to face in the near future? And do you think it might even be harder for them?
It's different challenges. You know, times were never easy. I think that you always have to face the challenges that are of your generation. All we have to do is to prepare them for the future. I think to be resilient, to be hardworking, to try to never stop to learn, to be down to earth, to speak with everybody on eye level. That never changed. You want to make it somewhere, you got to work hard.
A lot of what your life is about, from what I understand, is ethical and moral obligations as well, right? To the world, to the community.
A lot of people say, what differentiates an aristocratic family from a normal family? And I say, well, for us, it's traditions, upkeeping traditions. One is to upkeep the estates. The other one is also charitable things, you know, to be there for your community. I mean, in Germany, since 1918, there's no more aristocracy. It was abolished after the First World War. But people still address us with our titles here. People in town will call me, Your Serene Highness, how are you doing? Nice to see you. And it's not because, you know, for some of them, it's a game, because for them, they say it most of them, I think, do it out of tradition, and because they know what the family has been doing for hundreds of years for the community, for the area, and they show respect to the family, not to you yourself, not to me, but to what the legacy of the family is, which was always looking out for the community, which was always helping the less fortunate, which was always helping the old, the handicapped, the people in need, making sure everybody looks after them. People that work for us, they feel that they're part of our family. We see them as part of our family. And the wider community here respects that very much.
And you guys are active within that community. You have a band, right?
I do. Yes, that's right. Yeah. Well, you see here in town, it's a small village that we live in. It's literally a village. It's 300 people or something like that. And everybody knows everybody. And I am on first name basis with everybody. Well, the parents for my son's school are all friends of ours. And with some of them, I have a band. Yeah, we've been playing a couple of shows around here also. And we have a good time, yeah.
Do you feel like the reason why even people who say they're not in favor of the idea of royalty, still call you that? Do you think it's because maybe our society lacks role models?
Yeah, I mean, there's a bunch of role models. There's some good ones, and there's some bad ones. And but it's funny how royalty is still such an important thing. We saw it now with the crowning of Prince Charles, right, and or King Charles now. The royalty in Europe is so admired by so many people. I mean, every birthday of my 3-year-old child, we get about 20 postcards from people we've never even heard of who congratulate the young princess. And I get postcards where if we could send them a picture and a signature or something like that, where you're like, wow, people from Holland, people from Sweden, people from all over the place, And it's been around for thousands of years. Literally, our family's been around 1,000 years, and it's been not that long that we haven't had officially aristocracy here. And I think there's just always that romance, and every girl dreams of falling in love with a prince. And on the other hand, it's not something that anybody can ever just relax on. I think if you have a history and a title and a family like ours, you have to see it also as a responsibility to do the right thing and to be very responsible in everything that you do. If it's in business, if it's in the way you interact with people, and to upkeep your traditions of helping people.
I think I read online somewhere that your dad is in the Hall of Fame for like the best dressed Hall of Fame.
He's an incredibly elegant man, and I look up to him because I try to get there, and I made an effort right now to look good in your podcast, but I have to make an effort. To him, it just is completely natural. And he was in the Vanity Fair best dressed. I don't know what, but it's really friends and friends of friends, people around. People meet you. They're like, I think your father is one of the most elegant people. It's just born into him. And I don't know how I didn't get that gene. I have to work hard on trying to look good. But he just everything he picks out and everything he wears just looks amazing.
Catholicism plays a really important part of your family's history and your family's current life as well. You guys have a beautiful church inside your property where people from the village will often come and be in sermons with you guys. Can you talk about Catholicism, what it means to you guys historically, what it means to you guys presently?
Sure. So, our family has always been very religious. Jeanette and I are religious. We are practicing Catholics. We have a history of ancestors that were in the church, that were bishops and cardinals, and had important roles. It was usually like the main son was the ruler, and then the second and third sons would go into a church career or something like that. So there's a long connection to the church there. I think there's a lot of problems in the church. And the Catholic Church specifically, that's something that has been troubling me a lot, and that I've been working on with myself a lot. But I think what the overall most important thing is religion. It's usually a family tradition religion that you've been living, gives you a great frame with a lot of ethical sort of grounds that are important to you and to your heritage. And that's something I want to give on to my children. And I think if we look too much in the nitty-gritty of the politics of the church, we sometimes get too much caught up in that. And it's more important to really look what are the values that we want to pass on.
Earlier, we were talking about even traditions that are specific to your family.
Yeah.
That's the continuity. And I thought, well, as a Jew, that's something that we have as well. It's continuity since the temple 2,000 years ago.
It's funny, I don't know if it's right. I often compare the aristocratic families to the Jewish families in saying that we have an upholding of traditions over thousands of years, and that's what we're trying to do. Jewish people, why they are where they are today, is because they always held on to their traditions very strongly.
Right.
And this is the same thing the aristocrats have been doing. And the one thing is also with the marriage. You're just supposed to marry an aristocratic girl if you're an aristocrat, and it's the same thing with the Jewish people, right?
True.
So when people ask me like, "What is that like?" I'm like, "It's a bit like with the Jews. They're also supposed to marry, and for the same reasons. You speak the same language. You come from the same background." Now I broke that law, and I actually married a girl that's not aristocratic, but I think that I did the right choice.
I think so too. She's amazing. What I would add to that too is that they've been genocided constantly, pogromed all over Europe, the Middle East. And if you had spoken to an ancient Roman at the time of ancient Rome and asked them, which group here do you think is going to survive in 2,000 years? They would never have guessed that the group of Jews, right? And somehow they have. And I think it's extremely telling that like the Jewish people, they consider themselves 3,000 years old. Your family is 1,000 years old, right? It's just wild to me. But, going back to the Catholic thing, yeah, of course, there's problems with the church with regard to the horrible, horrible stories that have been coming out about child abuse. That doesn't mean that you throw out the baby with the bathwater. And I think that there's a lot of really beautiful things. I'm actually, my Mexican side is Catholic, and there's just so many beautiful traditions that I think make their lives so much more substantial and so much fuller, right, for having been exposed to that Catholic world. And another thing that people don't quite understand, and you can speak to this, is a lot of people just think the Nazi movement was some just Christian movement. And in fact, had they been able to persecute the Catholics, they would have. They just kind of ran out of bandwidth after having to stage a war, plus persecuting all the people that they were already persecuting.
It's the Catholics, and the aristocrats were next on the list also. Hitler didn't like the aristocrats very much.
Whenever I come to Germany, I always make it a point to talk to young people about what their experience in their schools are about learning about World War II, about the Holocaust. Almost every time they will say that they were made to feel guilty in a way that made them resentful or uncomfortable collectively for things that happened nearly 100 years ago. I sympathize with that view. And they always say, of course, it's important that we know, but there's this idea that maybe German schools and German culture harps too much on this. Of course, we should never forget what happened. I've had family in the Holocaust that, unfortunately didn't make it out. This kind of obsession with looking backwards, do you think it's a healthy way for Germany to live their present life and their forward-thinking lives?
If you ask me, how was it for me growing up, we learned a lot about it in school. And from a very young age, you're taught this. And I don't think it was taught in a way that we felt guilty. You do feel a certain guilt. And as Germans, you always have this somehow above you, and it's gonna take generations to not feel this guilt anymore. I think it's important that we're educated about it, and I think it's very important to say this is how it happened. This is where we were in World War I. This is where we were completely devastated after World War I. Then we had the Weimar Republic, total disaster. Then all of a sudden mayhem, and then all of a sudden this charismatic figure comes in who starts motivating people and saying we have actually something to be proud of, and then drives them into the Third Reich, And it was, everybody says, oh, it was just a Nazi. Everybody was completely fascinated by this person, And there was a lot of people who weren't. We have great letters where some aunts of mine write to my great-great-grandfather who thought Hitler was inspiring, saying, oh, he's a terrible person, and all the stuff he's saying. He's like a dog barking. You shouldn't listen to this guy. Don't listen. So there was, a lot of polarity also there. But when you try to understand how can it happen, I still ask myself all the time, when I went to the States and I studied in Georgetown University, I took a lot of politics classes and ethics and international relations classes, stuff like that. And I was always put up front and asked this question. And people are like, how are you educated in Germany? And how do you feel about it? And there's Jewish people in the class who didn't know that we get educated about this. And they think in their head, I had discussions with them, which after I held my speech and I told them what's going on, they said, I feel very different about you now. I was really disturbed about you sitting here next to me because I thought about your probably grandfather killing my grandfather kind of thing, And there's just not enough education about these things outside of Germany.
But that's a strange reaction, in my opinion, for a Jewish person to have. That's because even if your grandfather was part of it, you weren't.
It shouldn't be guilt-driven, but it should be understanding history, what happened, and how can we make sure it never happens again. And I think that's important.
I have a friend whose one set of his grandparents were Nazi youth programs, and the other set are Jewish. Yeah. And the Nazi youth grandparents went to his bar mitzvah, right? and they're all friends and they're all really close. And they just kind of look to presently and forward. And it's not to say that the things that happened here shouldn't be completely remembered to make sure we don't make the same mistakes again. It's just to mean emotionally, it's important that we try our best to have grace and move forward.
Sure.
And one of the things I fear the most, Christian, and you can tell me if you think I'm crazy, is that if we obsess too much, especially in a place like Germany, over this thing, the younger generations who feel very, very removed from it by this point will end up becoming anti-Semitic as a consequence.
And you know what? It's right now. The strong right wing party, which is the AfD. They're making a point of saying we have to stop having this guilt, and we have to. And it sounds a bit too. That is where we. So, for example, in 2006, I think it was, Germany was doing really well in the World Cup. It was in Germany. I think it was the World Cup. And for the first time in history, after the war, Germans actually walked around with German flags.
I was here on my high school senior trip,
right?
and there were little kids.
And there were little kids with flags, and people would put the flags in their face, and they have it on the cars everywhere. And this was impossible to do before that. People were just not comfortable with. If you had a German flag, people were like, "You can't have that. Put that flag down." It was on government buildings, and that's it. There's no pride in being German. Oh, it's still then, and all of a sudden, everybody was proud of being German, and it was talked about as the Sommermärchen. It's called in German, which is the summer story. Still now everybody thinks back on this was when really change happened, and now you have these right-wing parties who taken it a little bit too far, and who are saying we have to now, then why should we still? They want to, they say in Berlin we have the Holocaust memorial, and it's like a sore in the town, that reminds us of, and it's like, no, it's important. We need these things to remind us that something bad happened and we got to move on.
Not being from Germany or living here, I don't understand that reality, which is that there's a sentiment behind what the right wing is doing.
Yeah, it's the extremes, So we still have this really feeling that it's not that long ago, it's 70, 80 years ago. Let's give it another generation or two until we're completely comfortable.
My grandma's 103 and still alive, and she moved from Poland to the U.S. with her immediate family, and everyone else died in the Holocaust. She's still alive.
Yeah, it's very recent, and I think we've done a good job understanding, but yeah.
Being a Jew here in Germany for the first time when I was 18, walking around during that World Cup and seeing all these people wave flags, I was excited because I saw these kids and I thought, man, like these people really, it's cathartic.
And I think it's important. I think it's important to have national pride, and we as Germans should be proud of what Germany has become after the war and what we've done with it. And it's more important now than ever, but in a balance to history, let's say.
Totally. You are an investor. What stuff are you currently extremely excited about? What are you most focused on? What are you most passionate about?
Since my wife is in venture capital, in the last 6 years, we've been investing in venture capital things, and it's usually stuff that comes from her office to us. There's some exciting companies that we're looking at in all kinds of spaces. Things like, Stripe, obviously, Personio in Germany, which is HR software. So a lot of the software that makes our lives easier and better, I'm excited about. I'm excited about a company which like a dream that it happens. It's a vertical takeoff and landing air transport taxi, basically.
Wow. Is it like an Uber?
It's like an Uber, exactly. And it's still far off from hitting the market, but it's something that I think here, living in the countryside, would be very comfortable for us to have. One of those things to land, you jump in and then you fly off to Munich. In 20 minutes, you're there. That would be very helpful. My investment approach is I like to invest with people that I know, that I trust. I invest with some of our mutual friends.
You have a really full, overfull life. You do a ton, and you really care about the things you're working on. What would you attribute that to? Is it something you were born with? Have you always been this way? Is it something that you developed? Is it something that you've been able to nurture in the various environments you've been in?
It's a good question. I'm not sure. I think there's a certain curiosity inside of me, and there's a great passion inside of me. I'm always very passionate about things that I do, and no matter if it's the family business or if it's new business that I'm looking into, if it's a charity, if it's my family, whatever it is, I put my full heart into it, and I really embrace it. I try to understand everything about it. I try to really go, as I say, with my heart into it, because I'm a very sort of loving person, and I need to embrace the situation. I'm like that with my friends. I'm like that with my peers, and so it's just putting a lot of strength into it. I think that's what it takes.
For people who have new money in my life that have recently made it basically as success stories, there's often a level of distrust for new people because it's very hard to figure out who might be trying to take advantage of you, who might not be trying to take advantage of you. New real relationships are often very hard to form. How, as a kid, did you navigate that world?
How to interact with people or trust people or know who you can trust and so on and so forth. Growing up and thinking about relationships with other people. When you grow up in this environment, you're maybe different to someone who's made it. They're a little bit insecure how to interact. How do I act here? What do people think of me? How should I be interacting with them? And for me, it was always very sort of easygoing. I never had to think about that. I was brought up with my parents, always meeting interesting people, having them around. So when I come into a room, I always feel very self-secure, and I'm just interested in who's there and who am I meeting, And that's maybe something that you learn from your parents, you learn from your grandparents, how they interacted with people, and it's just kind of something that is given to you. I guess that's one of the privileges that is given to you when you grow up like that.
One of the characteristics I've been noticing for people who are high performing and do amazing things with their lives is they never lose that boyish sort of curiosity. Right? Like the ghost stories, the way you talked about them, your eyes lit up, right?
Yeah.
And for people that can tap into that kind of childlike part of their brain still, they end up having the most powerful and fulfilled lives, right? Because if you never lose that spark that you had as a kid.
And that's important. I think when you interact with artists and you learn to see the world through their eyes, really spending time and trying to understand it, it opens new worlds to you, which are so wonderful. In one, becoming again an inner child. Two, sometimes it is inspiring for business. Sometimes it's inspiring for many other things that you do in life. And so it's such an important part of life. Like music is, art is. I couldn't live without those.
You have an art philanthropy.
Yeah.
And it seems like it's a big focus for you and for Jeanette.
Mm-hmm.
And what is it? And what are you guys doing? And how did you guys get involved with that?
We've been walking around the house, and you saw there's a lot of art hanging around now. Our family has been collecting art since the very beginnings. In Donaueschingen, where the family originally comes from, there's actually a museum where there's also a bunch of art. And every family, head of the family always had somewhat their collection. And so when Jeanette and I got married, we said we want to start our own collection, and we want it to be contemporary, and it should be from artists our age and sort of our times. And since we both always were very interested in art, and it's something that connected us from very early stage on in our when we were dating, that was always a dream of ours to build a collection one day. We started a patronage where we have an apartment here in the building where artists can come. Every year we pick 3 artists. They come here, they get to work here, we get to meet them, we can spend time with them, and they get a small amount of money, but they get to live in a castle or in front of a castle, but basically live together with us, experience this, and learn a lot more about art from these artists, and just spending time with them, and built quite a nice collection now in the last 13 years. Yeah.
Patronages are an extremely empowering thing for artists.
Yeah.
It seems to me like there's less and less patronages now than there used to be. Do you find it to still be a common sort of staple within the aristocratic ranks?
It's not necessarily an aristocratic focus, although, I have a lot of aristocratic friends who have no clue about art, and I have some who are completely passionate about it. So I wouldn't say it's that, and I know a lot of industrial families who are very passionate about art. So I think you can't pin it on that.
Your grandfather was really close to Kaiser Wilhelm. Is that
Great-grandfather.
Great-grandfather, okay.
Great-great-grandfather, 2 times great.
Okay, 2 times great. They were best friends.
Yeah.
They were in a fraternity.
They were in a fraternity. Borussia it was called in Bonn. They were together in a fraternity in college. Absolutely, yeah.
Because of their friendship, your great grandfather was in the room when he abdicated in the Netherlands.
He was visiting him in the Netherlands. So when he abdicated, I don't think he was in the room when he abdicated, but he got in the train and he got out, and mixed feelings about if that was the right thing to do. But he was very close to him, so he went to visit him actually quite often. I actually sent you a picture where it's the 70th birthday of the Kaiser, and they're all there with him. And yeah, it's an interesting story. We have around the house, we have a lot of artifacts of of those times, and it was a close relationship. And before the First World War, during the First World War, the Kaiser would come here to Heiligenberg or to Donaueschingen, to our other castle, and he would, just to get away from politics, from Berlin. Everybody was trying to influence him, talk to him, and he would come talk to his buddy. And there's a lot of, he was journaling, my great grandfather. And there's a great book, which unfortunately not in English. We just brought it out. My father had it written by a couple of historians and him together 2-3 years ago about this person, because he was such an interesting person who had great influence on the Kaiser of Germany, great influence on the Kaiser of Austria at the time, and his position and during the First World War and all that. And yeah, it's something that is our family is all around us all the time.
That's a really cool part of your family history, honestly, that I didn't know about till today. Are there any, interesting, intriguing stories that you're allowed to share from either people and ancestors or just things that weren't public that now can be, that wouldn't be too
there
crazy?
was one intriguing one that's actually also in that book. There was a scandal in Donaueschingen, and one of those, I forget the name now, and I should know this. One of the, I don't know, it's important politicians or generals at the time of the Kaiser, they were in the castle in Donaueschingen, and he killed himself. They had a party, and it was a little bit wild. This general or politician, it escapes me who he was now, apparently was dressed in a woman's dress and was making a show that everybody was laughing at. It was something funny at the time or something like that. Maybe it wasn't funny for him. Anyways, there's many different stories how it happened, but eventually he shot himself. And that was a big scandal that had to be kept secret then. And there's letters that were going around and so on and so forth. And then eventually it came out. So that was that was something that happened in history in our house. But I'm gonna have to read up exactly how it was again. But it's one of those like crazy stories from the past. There's many crazy stories from the past.
South Africa is a place that you go with your family to, and you've been investing a lot in real estate there.
Yeah.
And you're very bullish on their future.
Yeah.
Can you tell me about it, why you're bullish about them and why you're excited to spend so much time there?
In COVID, the second COVID epidemic, we were vacationing in a warm place, and Mrs. Merkel came on the television and said, we're going to lock down Germany for another 2 weeks. And I looked at Jeanette and was like, this is not going to be 2 weeks. It's going to be another 3 months like last time. Let's go somewhere warm, because Germany is cold and horrible in the winter. And we spoke to a bunch of friends who were in different places, and one of ours was in Cape Town, South Africa. And he said, you guys should come here. It's great. And this was the time when everybody called the Delta virus the South Africa virus, because it was discovered there, right? And so and then we said, but it's South Africa, isn't there the virus there? And he's like, it's just the same virus that's anywhere. They're just calling it because it's there. And it's literally, everybody's fine here. Come, you'll see, it's beautiful. So we found a house, we rented a house, we went there, and we spent 3 months in Cape Town. We completely fell in love with Cape Town. It's such a beautiful place, especially in our winter. Their summer, it's the most fascinating place. We decided to buy a house there. And then once you live there, obviously you get involved with the place a lot more. And we understood that the Western Cape, South Africa has a lot of problems, but the Western Cape is very progressive, and it's developing very fast in a positive way. And when we first went to Cape Town, the city of Cape Town was still a little bit scary, and there were certain areas we didn't want to go to because you didn't feel safe, and it looked a bit grim. And last year, the center of town looked completely different, and you had, the streets were clean. On every street, you have a police person or a security person standing there. You can eat off the street; it's so clean. Everywhere, there's little shops, there's little coffee shops, there's little bookshops, there's little fashion stores, there's little WeWork places, and it's thriving. We were talking to a friend of ours who's a developer, and he said he's very bullish on it, and showed us around, and we were so convinced that we said, yeah, absolutely, we want to invest here. I think this is happening. There's a lot, and there's in winter times, tons of Germans go in there. Now the Americans are starting to come there. It feels a bit like California, to tell you the truth. When you're there, it feels like Santa Barbara or something.
It's wonderful to hear, because after the horrors of what they went through with apartheid, obviously,
yeah,
and since then with bouts of pretty severe corruption, you just really hope that you're right, and that this is an auspicious time for that country to turn around after what they've been going through for so many generations.
still going to take a lot of time. It's like with Germany, it's only 30 years ago that, that we had apartheid. It's an ongoing fight, and racism is everywhere. It takes 25 years for a generation. It's over that now. The younger generation are not thinking about that too much anymore. They're focusing on education. A lot of people are going to university. I mean, you go to the townships, the slums there. It's horrifying. It's absolutely horrible. We do some charitable work there, but there's a lot of hope also. And there's a lot of people who make it out of there and who build great things and who then go back and build charities and help their peers and make sure that people have a better place.
When we first met at the airport in Canada, I was like, how can you be bullish about South Africa? And you totally spun me around there. And I've been looking into it. Actually, like I'm very hopeful now based on what you've told me, but also what I've been researching since we first met.
It's still a big bet, but because, there's still corruption, there's still a lot of inequality. It's not going to happen in the next 2, 3, 4 years. It's going to take a while, but it's, I think in 10 years, we're going to have a really exciting country down there. And Africa is the future, everything, everybody's looking at Africa because it's an exciting place. It has everything. It has all the resources. Everything's there. It's just that corruption that is so strong that is ruining it. But if there's a chance, then South Africa is one of the first countries in Africa who can make it because they have a very good governmental system. They have a very good constitution and, great possibilities.
Okay, so my last question, unless you remember any fun story like the one that you told us about the cross-dressing suicidal guy. I have someone who I'm very close to who is very interested in starting his own noble house, and he's got the resources to do so. What general tips would you give someone like that?
Number one, you have to start with elegance, and that's something he's struggling with. No, I'm kidding. He's doing really well.
I think he's super elegant.
Yeah, no,
his wife is extremely elegant.
He's learned a lot, and he's going.
You've been a good teacher so far.
He's going in the right direction.
But what basic? I'm talking codes of ethics, general traditions. What kind of things would you recommend in addition to the elegance?
I think it's humility. You have to this person that we're talking to, and there's a lot of people that we know like that have made in one generation, they've made an enormous wealth, and they've created something fantastic. And I think it's the most important thing is to understand, and he does that, and a lot of our friends who've done that have that also, is you have to stay humble. And it's of course great to think, oh, I want to build a castle and I want to build a legacy and all that, but I think the most important thing is to think one step at a time, and you want to build a certain basis for it. You want to find your traditions that you want to hold on to, which should be, humble, and which should be benefiting a lot of people around you. And then it's step by step. You're not going to jump from today to 800 years from now. You got to educate your children. I think that's the most important thing. You got to give your kids the right education, give them your ideas of where you see the future, how you want it for them. And then you can't force it on them, but you can, encourage them that is something that you want to build. And we see it with the Duttons in Yellowstone. Yeah, there's many 7th generation families that have built something, and it might look big, but it's fragile, and it always is. So it's just like generation for generation with your values, try to keep them humble and based on important things, and you'll make it.
So you wouldn't advise him to start like a beer company or a forestry?
No, not today. Not today. Beer companies are in like five companies that own all the beer companies, and you're not gonna do very well there. Land owning is something that is difficult. We all know about that, but it's sometimes it's a home. Yeah, it's a tradition that can be a heritage that goes back to a home. That could be something. Everybody's got to figure it out for themselves. Or is it the business that you want to keep on passing on, or is it something that is just a classic family tradition? I mean, that in the end, you got to figure out for yourself what it is that you want to pass on, what you want to build, and that generations from now, people are going to look back and say that it's really worth it to keep that going. And I think everybody's got to figure that out for themselves.
It's so fun learning about this world through you. I'm super grateful for this conversation, and thank you.
Absolutely. It's been super fun talking to you, and enjoyed it. Thank you so much for having me.
I like you with the beard.
Yeah, you know what? I had it for many years, but it turned white, and I looked like Santa Claus. And then I was
Mine
like,
turned white
Yeah,
recently.
so I had to take it off.
Yeah, it's not very good anymore.
I looked so old, you know. I just had white down here, and then it was more and more, and all of a sudden the whole thing was white. And I was like, "No, I look so old. I'm gonna take it off."
You look good without a beard. Like
Yeah.
one thing that I'm really afraid of is balding. My family
Oh,
on the
okay.
Mexican
Doesn't
side really
look-
balds.
You will
Dude,
too soon. Yeah,
dude, that's totally a bald
you're covering it up nicely.
You
there.
see that? It's coming. It's
all
coming
right.
in.
You just gotta wear your Jewish.
Yeah, you just wear the yarmulke all the time.
You'll be fine.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. I just
One of the
gotta-
main reasons people
Yeah, Jews figured it out. They were like, oh,
cover it up. Don't want God to see the bald spot.
yeah, I missed that one in the Talmud. But dude, no, that was awesome. Thank
Right?
you.